Dr. Jai-Ho Park stared at the email on her screen, reading it for the fifth time. Her hand shook as she touched the SpaceX logo at the top of the message. She had been chosen. Out of 10,000 applicants, they had picked her to help build humanity's first home on Mars. The morning sun streamed through her office window at the Space Research Center in Houston. Outside, birds chirped, completely unaware that history was being made. Jai-Ho took a deep breath and looked at the small plant on her desk, a cactus she had grown in simulated Mars soil. That little experiment had started her journey 3 years ago. Now, it would take her to another planet. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called out, quickly wiping away tears of joy. Mission Commander Ta-Won Kim walked in, his usual serious expression softened by a slight smile. "I guess you got the email too," he said, holding up his phone. Jai-Ho nodded, unable to stop her own smile. She and Ta-Won had worked together for the past 2 years, testing ways to grow plants in Mars-like conditions. What had started as a professional relationship had grown into something more, though neither of them had acted on their feelings. Now they would be leading humanity's greatest journey together. "Elon wants to meet with the core team tomorrow," Ta-Won said, sitting down in the chair across from her desk. "We're flying to Texas in 3 hours." Jai-Ho looked at her cactus again. "Do you think we can really do it, Ta-Won? Build a real home on Mars?" Ta-Won leaned forward, his eyes bright with determination. "If anyone can do it, it's this team. Your work on atmospheric modification is revolutionary. The bacteria you engineered could actually help us breathe on Mars someday." Jai-Ho stood up and walked to her window, looking at the busy street below. "My parents think I'm crazy," she said softly. "They don't understand why I would want to leave Earth forever." "To be fair, it does sound crazy," Ta-Won replied with a gentle laugh. "Leaving everything behind to live on a cold, red rock millions of miles away. But that's what explorers do. That's what humans do. We push boundaries." A notification popped up on Jai-Ho's computer. It was a video call request from her old professor at Seoul National University. News was spreading fast. "We're going to be very busy from now on, aren't we?" she asked. Ta-Won stood up and checked his watch. "You have no idea. The training schedule they sent me is intense. 2 years of preparation before launch." He paused at the door. "Pack a bag for Texas. And Jai-Ho, congratulations. There's no one I'd rather have as our terraforming specialist." After he left, Jai-Ho sat back down and opened her desk drawer. She pulled out an old photograph of her family standing in front of their small apartment in Seoul. 10 years ago, she had told her parents she wanted to study space agriculture. They had worried she was wasting her time. Now, she would help build humanity's first colony on another planet. She carefully placed the photo in her bag, along with the small cactus from her desk. As she packed, a new email arrived, the full list of the Mars mission's core team. She recognized many names: Hae-Nul Lee, the brilliant engineer; Sun-Mi Cho, the medical officer who had written groundbreaking papers on space medicine; Min-Ho Kang, whose AI systems would help guide them to Mars. These people would become her new family. Together, they would face challenges no humans had ever encountered. They would either succeed and open a new chapter in human history, or fail and possibly die trying. Jai-Ho closed her bag and took one last look around her office. The next time she sat at a desk, it might be in a pressurized habitat on Mars, looking out at red rocks and dust storms. The thought should have scared her, but instead, it filled her with excitement. She had always dreamed of doing something that would change the world. Now she would help change 2 of them. The morning of the launch was perfectly clear at Kennedy Space Center. Engineer Hae-Nul Lee stood before the massive Starship Pioneer, its silver surface gleaming in the early sunlight. In just 6 hours, this vessel would carry the first permanent Mars settlers into space. If everything went according to plan. Hae-Nul rubbed his tired eyes. He had been awake for nearly 20 hours, running final checks on all systems, Something didn't feel right about the oxygen recycling numbers, but he couldn't find the problem. "You look worried," a voice said behind him. Hey Newell turned to see Dr. Jaho Park approaching with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "The life support readings are strange," he said, taking a grateful sip. "They're within acceptable range, but barely. I don't like barely when we're talking about breathing in space." Jaho nodded seriously. "Show me." They walked to the control room together. The space was already buzzing with activity as technicians prepared for the launch. On several screens, news channels showed the crowds gathering outside the Space Center. Millions had come to watch history being made. Hunt Newell pulled up the life support data on his computer. "Look at these oxygen recycling patterns," he said, pointing to a graph. "They should be steady, but there's a tiny flutter every few cycles." Jaho studied the screen, her expression growing concerned. "Have you told Commander Kim?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure first." As if summoned by his name, Commander Ta-Won Kim walked into the control room. He was already wearing his flight suit, carrying his helmet under his arm. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately noticing their serious faces. Newell explained the problem. With each word, the commander's expression grew more worried. They had a 4-hour launch window to reach Mars with minimum fuel use. Any delay could set the mission back by months. "How long to fix it?" Ta-Won asked. Newell ran calculations in his head. 3 hours if we're lucky. "But we need to be sure. This system has to work perfectly for 6 months." Ta-Won looked at the clock, then at the crowds on the news screens. He pressed his communication button. "This is Commander Kim. All crew to the briefing room immediately. We have a situation." Within minutes, the core team gathered. Medical Officer Sun Mi-cho and software architect Min-ho Kang sat next to each other, both looking concerned. The others filed in quickly, their excitement about launch day now mixed with worry. "Newell, explain what you found," Ta-Won ordered. As Newell showed the data, Min-ho suddenly sat up straight. "Wait," he said, "I think I know what's wrong. The new AI system is trying to be too efficient. It's adjusting the oxygen levels more than necessary." Newell's eyes widened. "Can we fix it?" "Give me 1 hour," Min-ho said, already typing on his laptop. "I'll modify the AI's parameters. It's trying to be perfect when we just need it to be consistent." The next hour was the longest of their lives. The launch control team had to explain the delay to the waiting crowds. Elon Musk himself called twice for updates, but no one rushed Min-ho as he worked. Finally, he looked up. "Try it now." Newell ran the tests again. The oxygen recycling pattern had steadied. He checked it 5 times to be sure, then turned to Commander Kim with a smile. "We're good to go." The relief in the room was powerful. They still had enough time in their launch window. Ta-Won stood up. "Suit up, everyone. We're going to Mars." 2 hours later, strapped into their seats aboard Starship Pioneer, the crew listened to the countdown. Newell felt the engines rumble to life beneath him. He looked at his teammates, now his family for the next 6 months and beyond. They had already faced their first challenge together and won. 10, 9, 8. Jaho reached across the aisle and squeezed Newell's hand quickly. "Thank you for being thorough," she whispered. 3, 2, 1. The roar of the engines drowned out everything else. As they rose from Earth, Newell smiled. Their journey to Mars had begun, and thanks to attention to detail and teamwork, they were starting it safely. 3 months into their journey to Mars, Medical Officer Sun Mi-cho stood in the Starship Pioneer's medical bay, studying the vital signs on her tablet. The patient before her, Mission Specialist Young Jo Choi, had not kept down food for 2 days. His case of space adaptation syndrome was the worst she had seen. "The medicine isn't working," Young Jae said weakly, his face pale. "I don't understand. I passed all the training." Sun Mi adjusted his IV drip. "Everyone reacts differently in actual space. The simulations can only prepare us so much. She tried to sound confident, though inside she worried. They were too far from Earth to turn back. The medical bay's door slid open, and software architect Minho Kang entered. The AI detected unusual movement patterns in this section, he explained. I came to check if everything is okay. Sun Mi gestured him closer. Maybe your eye can help. I need to analyze his symptoms against our medical database, but there's too much data to sort through quickly. Minho nodded and pulled out his tablet. His fingers flew across the screen as he modified the eye's search parameters. Give me his exact symptoms. As they worked, Commander Ta-Won Kim's voice came over the ship's speakers. All crew, report to the shelter immediately. Solar radiation storm approaching. This is not a drill. Sun Mi's heart raced. They had trained for this, but facing an actual solar storm was different. She looked at young Jae, who was in no condition to move. Minho, help me with the bed. We need to get him to the shelter. Together, they unlocked the medical bed's wheels. The shelter was in the center of the ship, surrounded by water tanks that would help block the radiation. As they pushed young Jae through the corridors, other crew members rushed past them, all heading to the same place. Inside the shelter, Dr. Jae-ho Park was already setting up emergency monitoring equipment. The space was tight with all 10 crew members inside, but they had practiced this. Everyone knew their roles. Storm intensity increasing, Minho reported, watching his screens. I estimates we have 3 minutes before peak exposure. Commander Kim did a quick head count. Everyone's here. Seal the shelter. The heavy door closed with a hiss. They could do nothing now but wait and trust in their technology and preparation. Sun Mi kept checking young Jae's vital signs, worried about how the stress might affect his condition. Minho's eye continued to process young Jae's medical data during the storm. Suddenly, he looked up. Sun Mi, look at this. The AI found a similar case from an old Russian space station mission. They solved it by changing the patient's sleep position and using a different combination of medications. Sun Mi studied the information. This could work, she said, hope rising in her voice. She immediately began adjusting young Jae's treatment. The storm lasted 6 hours. They passed the time by telling stories about their lives on Earth, trying to stay calm. Young Jae even managed to smile a few times as his new treatment began to work. When they finally got the all-clear signal, everyone was exhausted but relieved. The ship's systems had protected them perfectly. As the crew returned to their regular duties, Sun Mi stayed with young Jae, watching his vital signs improve hour by hour. Commander Kim visited the medical bay that evening. How is he? Much better, Sun Mi replied. Minho's AI helped find the solution. I think he'll make a full recovery. The commander nodded approvingly. Good work, both of you. We're going to face more challenges before we reach Mars. But today proved something important. We're stronger when we work together. Sun Mi looked out the medical bay's small window at the distant stars. Earth was now so far away it looked like just another bright point in space. Ahead of them, though still too far to see, Mars waited. They had survived their first major crisis in deep space, and they had done it as a team. Young Jae slept peacefully now, his color returning to normal. Tomorrow, Sun Mi would start him on exercises to help his body readjust to their artificial gravity. One step at a time, they were making this impossible journey possible. Landing Operations Chief Do-Yeon Choi sat in the control seat of Starship Pioneer, her hands steady on the controls despite her racing heart. The red surface of Mars filled their view screen, but something was wrong. A massive dust storm covered their planned landing site in Jezero Crater. We need to make a decision, Commander Ta-Won Kim said from the seat beside her. We have fuel for 1 hour of flight time. After that, we must land, storm or no storm. Do-Yeon studied the sensor readings. 6 months of space travel had led to this moment. They couldn't fail now. The AI can guide us through the storm, she said, but I want to fly manually. Human eyes might see things the computer misses. Taiwan nodded. Your call. You're the best pilot we have. The rest of the crew sat strapped in their seats, silent as Du Yan began their descent. The ship shuddered as it hit the Martian atmosphere. Warning lights flashed as the dust storm threw their sensors into confusion. Visibility dropping, Du Yan reported calmly. Switching to ground-penetrating radar. Dr. Jaiho Park spoke up from her station. The storm is actually helping us. The static electricity is making the dust particles light enough for our radar to map the surface clearly. Du Yan smiled. Even Mars' challenges could become advantages if you understood them well enough. She guided the massive ship through the swirling red clouds, watching the radar display carefully. Suddenly, engineer Hainul Lee called out, "Energy spike in the dust. It's interfering with our landing thrusters." The ship lurched to one side. Du Yan's hands moved quickly over the controls, compensating for the power fluctuation. She had trained for this in simulations, but the real thing was much harder. "There!" she shouted. Through a brief gap in the storm, she spotted a flat area. The radar confirmed it was solid ground. Everyone braced for landing. The next 3 minutes felt like hours. Du Yan pushed away all distractions. The warning alarms, the shaking of the ship, the worried breathing of her crewmates. She focused only on the landing site and her controls. With a powerful thud that shook everyone in their seats, Starship Pioneer touched down on Mars. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then the computer confirmed what they all hoped. They had landed safely. The crew's celebration was interrupted by more sensor readings. "These are strange," Hainul said, studying his screen. "The ground composition near us is different from what our probes showed. There's something here we didn't expect." As the dust storm cleared, they got their first real view through the ship's windows. The Martian landscape stretched out before them, a mix of red rocks and sand. But near their landing site, the ground sparkled with unexpected crystals. Those formations. Jaiho moved closer to the window. "They're perfect for our terraforming bacteria. They'll help us process the Martian atmosphere much faster than we planned." Du Yan felt a wave of relief. Not only had she landed them safely, but they had found something valuable by landing in this unexpected spot. Sometimes the best discoveries came from being forced to change plans. Commander Kim placed a hand on Du Yan's shoulder. "Outstanding work," he said. Then he addressed the whole crew. "Tomorrow, we'll take our first steps on Mars. Tonight, we rest and check all systems. We're not tourists here. We're here to build a new home for humanity." Du Yan looked out at the alien landscape. The dust storm had completely passed now, revealing a sunset that turned the Martian sky deep purple. She thought about all the pilots who had dreamed of this moment, all the years of preparation that had led to this landing. They had reached Mars, but their real work was just beginning. Tomorrow, they would start building humanity's first home on another planet. For now, though, Du Yan simply enjoyed the view. They had made it. Colonial architect Jinwoo Park stood inside the first completed habitat dome, admiring how the Martian sunlight filtered through the specially designed panels. After 1 month on Mars, they had finally built something that felt like home. "The air pressure is holding steady," he said into his radio, checking the readings on his tablet. "Power systems are working at full capacity." Outside the dome, other crew members in their spacesuits continued assembling the second living space. The habitat modules had arrived in cargo ships months before the crew, but putting them together on Mars' rocky surface proved harder than their training suggested. Botanist Yoon Hee Kim walked up beside Jinwoo, carrying a sealed container of Martian soil. "The first dome is ready just in time," she said. "My plants can't stay in the ship's small-growth chamber much longer." Jinwoo watched as she carefully placed the container on a nearby table. Inside were the first test plants they would grow in actual Martian soil. Dr. Jaiho Park had modified the soil with special bacteria designed to help Earth plants survive in it. "How long until we know if it works?" Jinwoo asked. A few days for the first signs. He replied, "If these plants grow, we can start producing our own food within 3 months." Their conversation was interrupted by a warning alarm. Red lights flashed as the dome's air pressure suddenly dropped. Jinwoo rushed to his control panel, his heart racing. "Dust breach in Section 3. Engineer Hae-Nul Lee's voice came through the radio. "The Martian sand is corroding the seals faster than we expected." Jinwoo quickly sealed off the damaged section. "Everyone in Section 3, evacuate immediately." He watched the pressure reading stabilize, but worry filled his mind. If they couldn't keep the dust out, all their work might fail. Commander Ta-Won Kim entered the dome, his face serious after removing his spacesuit helmet. "Status report. The dust is more corrosive than our tests showed," Jinwoo explained. "It's eating through our best seals. We need a new solution." Yoon-hee looked up from her soil samples. "Maybe we already have one," she said thoughtfully. "The bacteria Dr. Park created doesn't just help plants grow. It changes the chemical structure of the soil. What if we could use it to make the dust less corrosive?" The commander nodded slowly. "Work on it. Jinwoo, strengthen all seal points until they find a solution. We didn't come this far to be defeated by sand." Over the next week, the team worked tirelessly. Jeho and Yoon-hee modified their bacteria to target the corrosive elements in the Martian dust. Jinwoo and Hae-Nul designed new seals using materials from their 3D printers. Every day brought new challenges, but they faced them together. Finally, Yoon-hee called everyone to the dome's lab section. In a sealed chamber sat several small plants, the first earth plants ever to grow in treated Martian soil. Their green leaves seemed to glow against the red dirt around them. "They're growing twice as fast as expected," Yoon-hee announced proudly. "The bacteria isn't just helping them survive, it's helping them thrive. And the treated soil around them shows no corrosive properties." Jinwoo touched the dome's wall, thinking about how far they'd come. When he designed these habitats on Earth, they were just drawings on a screen. Now they were real buildings on another planet, protecting the first humans to call Mars home. Commander Kim smiled at the small plants. "Send the data to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them we've done it. Tell them we're not just surviving on Mars. We're starting to live here." Outside the dome's windows, the Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. Soon, they would plant gardens that would help feed future colonists. Their little piece of Earth on Mars was beginning to grow. 3 months into their Mars settlement, environmental systems specialist Se-Jin Yoon woke to the sound of an alarm he had never wanted to hear. The main water recycling system was failing. Se-Jin rushed to the control room, still pulling on his uniform. The system's displays showed numbers that made his stomach sink. Water purity levels were dropping rapidly, and the filtration units were shutting down one by one. "How bad is it?" Commander Ta-Won Kim asked, entering the room behind him. "Very bad," Se-Jin replied, typing commands into the system. "The filters are clogging faster than they should. At this rate, we'll lose clean water production in 48 hours. The commander pressed the base-wide communication button. "All essential personnel to the control room immediately. This is an emergency." Within minutes, the core team assembled. Engineer Hae-Nul Lee studied the system readings with growing concern. Dr. Jeho Park brought samples of the filter material for testing. The room felt heavy with worry. Without water recycling, they couldn't survive on Mars. "Show me the filter damage," Jeho said, setting up her portable microscope. Se-Jin handed her a piece of the clogged filter. Under magnification, the problem became clear. The filter material was breaking down, its structure crumbling under attack from something in the water. "There's a mineral in the Martian soil we didn't account for," Jeho explained, pointing to crystal-like formations on the filter. "When it dissolves in water, it becomes highly reactive. It's destroying our filtration system." Se-Jin felt his heart race. They had tested the water system extensively on Earth, but Mars kept finding ways to surprise them. How did we miss this? Our soil samples didn't show it. Newell said, checking old test data. The mineral must be more common in this area than where we tested. Commander Kim looked at each team member. Options. We have emergency water for 1 week, Se-jin reported. After that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what would happen if they ran out of water on Mars. Medical Officer Sun Ma-cho spoke up. Could we boil the water, change its chemical structure? That would use too much power, Newell replied. We'd run out of energy before we ran out of water. Se-jin stared at the filter samples, thinking hard. Their training had prepared them for equipment failures, but this was different. Mars itself was fighting against their survival. Botanist Yoon-hee Kim, who had been quietly observing, suddenly straightened. What if we fight chemistry with biology? She asked. The bacteria we use to treat the soil. It changes mineral structures. Could we modify it to target this specific mineral? Jai-ho's eyes widened. Yes, we could. But we'd need to identify the exact mineral first, and we'd have to work fast. Commander Kim nodded decisively. Do it. Se-jin, calculate exactly how long our emergency water will last. Newell, try to slow the system deterioration. Everyone else, help Jai-ho and Yoon-hee however you can. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. Se-jin barely slept, monitoring the failing systems while the others worked on a solution. They had come too far to be defeated now. Through the control room window, he could see the Martian landscape stretching to the horizon. The red planet's beauty hid deadly challenges, but humans had always survived by adapting and innovating. They would find a way through this crisis too. As the emergency water supply began to run low, Se-jin watched his teammates work tirelessly. Their lives depended on solving this problem. But more than that, humanity's future on Mars depended on it. Failure wasn't an option. Research Director Jun Seo Lee stood in the Mars Base Laboratory, watching Dr. Jai-ho Park adjust the bacterial cultures for the 100th time. Their emergency water supply would run out in 12 hours. The whole mission, and their lives, depended on finding a solution. The mineral analysis is complete, Jun Seo said, checking his tablet. It's a new type of reactive salt we've never seen before. When it dissolves in water, it becomes as corrosive as battery acid. Jai-ho nodded without looking up from her microscope. That explains why it's destroying our filters so quickly. But it might also be our salvation. She adjusted the microscope's controls, studying the bacteria they had modified to survive in Martian soil. The laboratory door opened, and botanist Yoon-hee Kim hurried in with new test results. The bacteria are responding to the changes, she reported. They're starting to break down the mineral in our samples. Jun Seo felt a spark of hope. They had been working non-stop for 4 days, trying to modify their soil treatment bacteria to target the dangerous mineral. Now they might finally have a breakthrough. Commander Ta-won Kim's voice came through the intercom. Status update. We're close, Jun Seo replied. The bacteria are working, but we need to make them work faster. Much faster. In the water treatment room next door, Engineer Newell Lee and environmental specialist Se-jin Yoon were trying to keep the failing system running. Through the window, Jun Seo could see them replacing damaged filters. They looked exhausted. What if we're thinking about this wrong? Jun Seo said suddenly. Instead of making the bacteria destroy the mineral, what if we make them transform it into something useful? Jai-ho looked up from her microscope, her eyes wide. Like what they do with the soil, changing it to help plants grow. She quickly began adjusting the bacterial DNA sequence on her computer. The next few hours passed in intense concentration. The team modified the bacteria again and again, testing each new version. They needed a strain that would work quickly enough to save their water supply, but safely enough to not cause new problems. Finally, after what felt like forever, Jai-ho stepped back from her workstation. It's ready, she announced. The new bacteria will change the mineral into a stable form that actually strengthens the filters instead of destroying them. Jun Seo immediately called the commander. "We have a solution, but we've never tested anything like this before. It's a risk." Commander Kim's response was immediate. "We're out of options. Do it." The whole crew gathered to watch as Jae-ho and Se-jin introduced the modified bacteria into the water treatment system. For 30 minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then the water quality readings began to improve. "The mineral content is dropping," Se-jin reported, his voice filled with relief. "Filter damage has stopped. The system is stabilizing." The crew broke into cheers and hugs. They had done it. Not only had they solved the crisis, but they had created something new. A bacterial strain that could protect future Mars colonies from the same problem. Jun Seo looked at his tired but happy teammates. Their success would change how humans approached survival on Mars. Earth's scientists were already eager to study their solution. "Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the worst problems," Commander Kim said, patting Jun Seo on the shoulder. "You've all done amazing work." Outside the base windows, a Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and red. They had faced one of their greatest challenges and overcome it through teamwork and innovation. Mars was harsh and dangerous, but human ingenuity was proving stronger. 1 year after landing on Mars, Dr. Jae-ho Park stood in the main dome's garden section, surrounded by thriving plants. The sweet smell of tomatoes and fresh herbs filled the air. Through the dome's transparent panels, she could see the second Mars mission ship descending from the orange sky, bringing new colonists to their growing settlement. "The oxygen levels are perfect," she said, checking the atmospheric readings on her tablet. The plants around her were doing more than providing food. They were helping create breathable air. After 12 months of hard work, their Mars base had reached its most important goal. It could sustain itself without supplies from Earth. Commander Ta-won Kim joined her in the garden, watching the landing ship through the dome's windows. "Remember when this was all empty space?" he asked, gesturing at the green plants all around them. "Now we're growing enough food for 50 people." Jae-ho smiled, remembering their difficult early days. They had faced dust storms, equipment failures, and the nearly disastrous water crisis. But each challenge had made them stronger, teaching them how to truly live on Mars. The main door opened, and Medical Officer Sun Mi-cho hurried in with exciting news. "Ming-hui is in labor," she announced. "We're about to have our first Martian baby." Jae-ho's heart raced. Ming-hui and her husband had been among the second group of colonists who arrived 6 months ago. Their baby would be the first human born on another planet. A true Martian. In the medical bay, the whole team gathered to help. Even as the new ship landed outside, bringing 20 more colonists, everyone's attention was focused on this historic moment. Engineer Hae-Nul Lee monitored the medical equipment he had carefully modified for Mars' lower gravity. Botanist Yoon Hee Kim brought special nutrients grown in their gardens. After several hours, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Sun Mi announced proudly. The baby was healthy and strong, already adapted to Mars' gravity. They named her Haeun, meaning Grace of Mars in Korean. Later that evening, as the new colonists settled into their quarters, Jae-ho sat in her office writing her daily report to Earth. She looked at the small cactus on her desk, the same one she had brought from her office in Houston. It had survived the journey and now had several new shoots growing from its base. "Just like us," she said softly, touching one of the new growths. "Adapting and thriving in a new world." Commander Kim knocked on her door, holding 2 cups of coffee made from their hydroponically grown beans. "The new colonists are amazed by what we've built here," he said, handing her a cup. They expected a survival outpost. Instead, they found a real community. Jae-ho took a sip of the coffee, remembering the day she had received the email selecting her for the mission. "When we left Earth, people called us crazy," she said. "They didn't believe we could really live on Mars. Now we're not just living, We're growing. Through her office window, she could see the lights of the new landing site, where crews were unloading supplies and equipment. Soon, they would build more domes, expand their gardens, and welcome more colonists. The second ship had brought scientists, teachers, and even artists. Mars wasn't just a scientific mission anymore. It was becoming a new branch of human civilization. Elon was right, Commander Kim said, watching the activity outside. Humans really can become a multi-planet species, and it all started here, with our little team. Jaiho thought about baby Hayan, the first of a new generation who would call Mars home. They had done more than just survive on the red planet. They had proven that humans could truly live here, grow here, and build a future here. As the Martian night fell, painting the sky with stars that looked different from Earth's view, Jaiho felt a deep sense of peace. They had faced the unknown and succeeded. The path to the stars was open, and humanity had taken its first steps into a larger world.